So we're talking about Zen influence today and how it relates to bonsai. Now, when most people think of Zen Buddhism, they think of those guys sitting on a cushion in a weird position doing nothing for like hours. And while that is one facet of Zen, it's not really what I want to focus on today because there are many other aspects to Zen that have far more relevance to bonsai. For example, like an artist creating a painting, a calligrapher writing calligraphy, a tea master preparing tea, or a gardener tending to a garden. These are all things that are done mindfully. They're not mindless tasks. They're not done with a lack of attention. They redone with awareness and intention, and that is something that I think is very much at the heart of bonsai. So that's what I want to talk about today, how bonsai is influenced by Zen and what that means to me. So I was reading through the comments on last week's video, and this comment caught my eye from Jason Ulo. He said, "When did you decide to begin practicing bonsai? What event caused you to start?" It's a great question and one that I don't think has a single answer. I think it's something that happens gradually and over time. You start to become aware of things and become more intentional with your life and your actions, and that eventually filters down into your hobbies as well. But I do think that there were some events early on that helped spark my interest in bonsai, and that one of those was visiting a Japanese garden. Now, I am very fortunate to live close to a beautiful Japanese garden here in Vancouver called the Van Dusen Botanical Garden. It is a beautiful garden with lots of ponds and waterfalls and maple trees and stuff, and I spent a lot of time there as a kid. My parents even had season passes when I was a child, but it wasn't until I started getting into bonsai that I really appreciated the Zen aspects of the garden. There's a nice little bonsai collection there. There's a nice little bonsai collection there and a Zen garden, which I didn't fully appreciate until I started learning about Zen principles and how they applied to bonsai. I want to touch on 3 points today. The first two are mindfulness and simplicity, and the third point is nature. I feel like these 3 points really form the backbone of Zen influence on bonsai, and each one deserves its own discussion. First up, mindfulness. So I mentioned earlier how bonsai is not just a mindless hobby, and that's something I truly believe. Bonsai can be very therapeutic and meditative. The process of raking bark, trimming leaves, fertilizing, watering, none of it requires a ton of brain power and can easily be done on autopilot if you were not paying attention. But if you're mindful while you're doing it, it becomes a very different experience, and that's where a lot of the Zen influence comes in. When we practice bonsai with mindfulness, we're retaking cues from the masters who have come before us and from the natural world around us. We're observing the tree closely, looking for signs of new growth, assessing how light is hitting the canopy, checking the root system, looking at the branching structure, and how it grows. We're constantly in dialogue with the tree and adjusting our course based on what we see. Now, when people think of pruning bonsai, they might think of that classic image of the guy with the bonsai on the table and a pair of bonsai scissors, snipping off leaves and branches and making the tree look nice and neat. Now, there is definitely a place for that kind of pruning, and it's important, and it does help the tree stay healthy. But when we're talking about Zen influence, we're talking about something a bit different, something that's a bit more intuitive and involves a bit more art form. In a way, it is less about telling the tree what to do and more about asking the tree what it wants to do and then helping it get there. So this type of pruning and shaping repeated over the years is less about control and more about fostering a dialogue with the tree. We're not trying to impose our will on the tree and force it into a particular shape. We're simply responding to what the tree is already trying to do. The tree has its own instincts and desires, and we're just helping it along. This also means that no two bonsai will ever look exactly the same. Every tree is unique and has its own story to tell. And our job as bonsai artists is to listen to that story and help the tree tell it as fully as possible. And that brings me to my next point, simplicity. This is something that I struggle with a lot. I have a tendency to overcomplicate things. That's just my nature. But bonsai is a great teacher of simplicity. It is easy to get caught up in the aesthetics of bonsai and to want to make everything look perfect. But in reality, the most beautiful bonsai are often the ones that embrace simplicity. When we overcomplicate bonsai, we run the risk of making the tree look artificial and out of place. But when we embrace simplicity, we create a sense of calm and serenity that is truly Zen. So when it comes to simplicity in bonsai, I'm talking about a few different things. First, we want to keep the design of the bonsai simple. This means using clean lines, strong angles, and avoiding overly complicated shapes. We also want to keep the branches and foliage of the tree simple. This doesn't mean that we want the tree to look sparse or bare, but rather that we want the branches and foliage to be arranged in a way that is pleasing to the eye and easy to understand. Finally, we also want to keep our bonsai simple. This means choosing a style of bonsai that suits the species of the tree and that fits well in our environment. It also means being realistic with our expectations and not trying to force a particular style onto a tree that it simply doesn't want to be. The final point I want to touch on is nature. I think this is something that's often overlooked when we're talking about bonsai, but it's really at the heart of the hobby. Bonsai are living trees and they need to be treated as such. This means giving them the space they need to grow, providing them with the light and water they need to thrive, and respecting their natural rhythms and cycles. When we do this, we create a sense of harmony between the bonsai and its environment, and that harmony is what makes bonsai so beautiful. In fact, the word bonsai literally means planted in a container. It's not meant to evoke images of gnarled, twisted trees that have been manipulated beyond recognition. It's meant to evoke images of trees that are growing freely in nature, expressing themselves through their roots, trunk, and branches. And when we approach bonsai with this mindset, we start to see them not as static objects, but as living, breathing organisms that are constantly growing and evolving. We start to see them as teachers that can help us understand the rhythms and cycles of nature and how to live in harmony with them. So those are the 3 points I wanted to touch on today: mindfulness, simplicity, and nature. I think these are all important aspects of Zen Buddhism, and I believe they are all reflected in the practice of bonsai. When we bring a Zen mindset to bonsai, we create bonsai that are not only beautiful, but also have a sense of calm and serenity that is truly special. On that note, I'm going to wrap up this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking it. It helps me out a lot. Also, let me know in the comments below what you think about these 3 points and how you incorporate Zen influence into your bonsai. Until next time, happy bonsaiing.